Boris Johnson is often known as a master of political survival. Throughout his career, the UK Prime Minister has been lucky. He has survived scandals that would have sunk his rivals, but this time around, he has faced a moment of truth. His ability to escape controversy finally ran out. Johnson has resigned, bringing his scandal-hit tenure to an end finally. So here's a look at some of the top scandals that defined his premiership. The first is obviously the Pincher scandal, the one that led to his downfall. Christopher Pincher was the Tory deputy whip until last week. He has since resigned after being accused of sexual misconduct. Downing Street had first said that Johnson was not aware of these allegations, but later, Number 10 issued a clarification. It said that the Prime Minister had initially forgotten that he was in fact informed about it in 2019. This led to mass resignations from the government. Ultimately, Boris Johnson had to step down. The second is obviously the infamous Partygate scandal. The term Partygate was coined to refer to the scandal over parties held in government, including those in Johnson's own Downing Street office. One lockdown party was even led by the Prime Minister himself. The gathering was initially to mark the departure of one of his aides, but when Boris walked in, he turned it into a party. The UK Prime Minister started pouring drinks for everyone. He even poured a drink to toast his aide, Lee Kane. Remember, these parties were happening at a time when the country was grappling with COVID-19. Thousands were at home unable to meet or bury their loved ones due to rules. Johnson was also fined for breaking COVID rules set by his own government. The third is a series of sex scandals which rocked the government. Lawmakers were accused of improper behaviour and sexual misconduct. This even led to 2 lawmakers resigning. In both cases, the Conservatives lost special elections held to replace them. The fourth one is the Owen Paterson affair. Last year, a Parliament committee wanted to suspend Paterson for 30 days. Paterson was a Conservative lawmaker and a former minister. It was found that he had committed a case of paid advocacy, which means that he lobbied on behalf of the companies that paid him. Johnson had at first defended Paterson, but later said that it was a complete mistake defending the ex-Tory MP. And the fifth is what many call the Redecoration Scandal. Johnson's Downing Street flat was refurbished by a celebrity designer. The redecoration even included putting gold wallpaper. The Prime Minister usually receives an annual grant to redecorate, but the cost to redecorate was more than 3 times higher. The work was initially paid for by the Cabinet Office, but later it was found that most of the costs were funded by a Tory donor. Britain's Electoral Commission later fined the Conservatives £17,800 for failing to accurately report the donation that paid for it. Our correspondent Sally Paterson has sent us this report from the latest. Take a look.
Right, there's a lot of speculation that he won't be able to fill all of those positions. We've seen throughout the morning local time, there's been announcements of new ministerial positions being filled one after another, but there are so many more left to do, as well as ministerial aides. And so it's really unclear if he is going to have the support to keep on going. Now, we've also seen some members of the cabinet who hadn't resigned, the small number, have said that they will continue on in those positions to support the running of the government as the leadership election takes place. So those include, for example, Home Secretary Priti Patel. But, as you mentioned earlier, Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, could well be on her way back to start her own leadership bid. So there's no doubt that some people who are either in the government as we speak or maybe soon asked to be in the government actually would rather use that time to start working on their own campaigns for an election that's likely to take place as soon as this summer. So it really is going to be still very much up in the air as to whether he is able to continue as Prime Minister, getting things through government, getting things through Parliament, keeping the country running when he has lost so much support.
The United Kingdom and London especially has been living through a prolonged period of political turmoil. Scandals, backbench politics, policy U-turns, inflation, a cost of living crisis and a handful of lies. Now a large population of London has reacted to the resignation with a sigh of relief. Rights workers, government employees, lawyers and even students, all of them had to say the same thing about the resignation. About time. Hundreds gathered outside Downing Street, eagerly awaiting for the highly anticipated announcement. They whipped out their camera phones. They booed at Boris Johnson through the resignation speech. They played loud music and chanted, "Bye bye Boris."
Music being played. Bye bye Boris. He's in there getting a sign.
About time, isn't it? Seriously. I mean, have you ever known anybody be so arrogant, ignorant, delusional? You know, the list goes on. I mean, it's interesting to see the people who've now found their integrity. You know, where was their integrity months ago? You know, that'll be interesting to see who now stands for leader of the Conservative Party now. Let's hope it's somebody that had their integrity a few months ago and not so recently.
You know, this is what happens when you've got a Prime Minister that has got no scruples. You know, lies after lies. How can you actually trust anyone, you know, especially in that position of trust? Who's, for me, I think he's betrayed the country, you know, and if there is no trust, you know, in a person in that position, then he has to go straight away, and he should have gone a long time ago.
So to have over 50 ministers giving a letter of resignation to Boris just shows the lack of confidence he has within the party. So in my eyes, it was needed. I mean, there's been so many scandals, Partygate, the handling of the COVID crisis. This is now the right time, I'd say. To be honest, the country has been in turmoil for many months with Boris and his handling of many issues. So looking hopefully forward to some brighter times ahead.
I'm really not that interested. It will be it will be somebody that isn't going to do a great job, and we need to wait for an election and change that. It's not necessarily Labour, but somebody other than the Conservatives. Yeah.
Johnson has resigned as Britain's Prime Minister, but the question is who will replace him as the leader of the Conservative Party next? Now, the problem with the Conservatives is the lack of a potential successor. There are several options, but none of them quite measure up. The first one is Rishi Sunak. UK's former Chancellor of the Exchequer, he has often been seen as the heir in waiting, but Sunak's popularity has plunged after a series of controversies. He's weighed down by policy blunders and his own scandals, and was also fined for attending Johnson's birthday party. The second is Liz Truss. The Foreign Secretary is the darling of the ruling Conservative Party's grassroots. She has regularly topped polls of party members. Truss has a carefully cultivated public image. The 46-year-old initially campaigned against Brexit, but after the referendum, she had changed her mind. However, Truss lacks voter appeal, and some Conservatives even doubt her ability to keep them in Parliament. And the third is Ben Wallace. The 52-year-old has taken over Truss to become the most popular government member among the Tories, and this is due to his handling of the Ukraine crisis. The former soldier began his political career as a member of Scotland's devolved assembly in May 1999, before being first elected to the Westminster Parliament in 2005. He also supported remaining in the European Union ahead of the referendum. Another frontrunner is former Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt. The 55-year-old finished second to Johnson in the 2019 leadership contest. Earlier this year, he said that his ambition to become Prime Minister has not completely vanished. In fact, last month, he said that he voted to oust Johnson in a confidence vote. Other options include the likes of Sajid Javid and Nadeem Zahawi, but they are not mainstream leaders or even credible alternatives. This makes replacing Johnson even more difficult. With Europe at war, the UK does not want a vacuum in the country's leadership amid these crises. For more details, I earlier spoke to Adam Schwartz from London about the same. He's a writer and political commentator. Listen into his inputs.
There certainly isn't a shortage of candidates who will want to go for the premiership. During this period of weakness over the last 6 months or so, when it's been looking like Boris Johnson was going to be ousted at some point in the near future, we've seen various members of the cabinet and a few people from outside of the cabinet sort of manoeuvring and shifting themselves into position to launch a leadership bid. I think until recently we'd seen former Chancellor Rishi Sunak had been sort of the heir apparent to take over, largely because of his popularity. However, we massively saw his popularity drop following his receipt of a fixed penalty notice for the event that he attended in Downing Street during the lockdown, and also a number of tax scandals involving his family. So I think ultimately, it's unlikely that it'll be him, although still possible. But the party really has several other options as well. Ben Wallace has topped the poll in a YouGov poll of Conservative Party members today, who's the current defence minister. He's considered really a very stable candidate, a very popular individual within the party, and has really respect from across the political spectrum. But we may also see others such as Liz Truss, who's the Foreign Secretary, go for it.
Boris Johnson is out. His exit sets the stage for a leadership battle in the Conservative Party, one that will determine who will be Britain's next Prime Minister. Now, this will lead to the election of a new Tory leader, the third in 6 years, but it is a contest that is full of twists, turns and backstabbing. So how does the process work? It takes place in 2 stages. The first will see 358 Conservative Party members battle it out. Under the current rules, candidates need the support of 8 Conservative MPs to stand, and once the candidates have been declared, the battle begins. If there are more than 2 candidates, the Tories hold a series of votes until 2 remain. The second stage will involve thousands of grassroots party members. They will be picking the winner in a secret ballot. Whoever wins the contest will become the leader of the Conservatives. The Queen will then ask them to form a government. However, the early favourite in the contest usually never wins. In 2016, Johnson was the favourite, but Theresa May ended up winning. In 2005 also, David Cameron won by overcoming favourite David Davis. Johnson will stay in office until a new leader is selected. The timetable is to nominate his replacement, and it will be set out next week. After Johnson agreed to resign, reactions came pouring in from leaders around the world. Let's now take a look at what was said across the globe. Starting with Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, who said, and I quote, "There would be a widespread sense of relief that the chaos will come to an end." However, she also said that Johnson staying as Prime Minister till autumn seemed far from ideal. Ireland's Prime Minister Michael Martin saw it as a chance or an opportunity to reset relations with the United Kingdom. He admitted that he didn't always agree with Johnson and that relations had been strained in recent times. The European Commission declined to comment on Johnson's exit. They just said that the developments did not change their Northern Ireland protocol or way of working with the UK on Northern Ireland. Ukraine, of course, had considered Johnson to be an ally in their fight against Russia. Volodymyr Zelensky's office thanked Johnson for his support during the most difficult of times. They also thanked him for always being in the forefront for supporting Ukraine. Russia also reacted to Johnson's exit. The Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said that Johnson really does not like us and we don't like him either. The Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Sakharov said that the moral of the story is do not seek to destroy Russia. Meanwhile, India's Ministry of External Affairs said that it wouldn't comment on the leadership change. They said that the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Boris Johnson enjoyed a close friendship and hoped the partnership between the countries would continue. Now, for a better understanding of what these global reactions mean, I also spoke to Adam Schwartz from London about the same. Listen in.
I think it's certainly true to say that Boris Johnson had been a sort of a major figure in support, certainly in support for Ukraine following Russia's invasion beginning in February of this year. I do think it's worth cautioning, however, the lines that come out of the Kremlin. Of course, there's been a huge amount of scandal and sort of curiosity over Russia's involvement in the Brexit vote in 2016, which, of course, as we know now, ultimately led to Boris Johnson's ascension to Downing Street. And so to some extent, I think, some people will say, in fact, that, Boris Johnson weakened the UK because of taking the UK out of the European Union. And so to some extent, the Russians may, in fact, be upset that Boris Johnson has gone. Certainly, if you look at the last year or so, the instability that has taking place under Boris Johnson's premiership is something that certainly benefited the UK's adversaries. So I think certainly in the Ukraine context, Ukraine will ultimately be sad to see Boris Johnson to go. He's got very high approval ratings in Ukraine, largely because of the early weapons that he supplied to Ukraine even before the war began. However, I think that whoever takes over the premiership from Boris Johnson in the UK will ultimately maintain the same level of support for Ukraine and ultimately the same support for NATO and international defence and security institutions. So I don't think it's going to have a major impact upon the global security situation as we currently see it.